Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys, and in the previous video we took the Massey Ferguson apart because it had frost damage, and if you haven't seen it you can always check that episode on my YouTube channel. Meanwhile, we have restored and rebuilt the cylinder head, although we couldn't weld it up, but now it's time to actually mount the cylinder head back on the block. Now there's a couple of things you need to do before you mount it. First of all, you have to make sure that the cylinder head is absolutely flat. So you may have to flatten it or have to have it leveled. In my case that wasn't necessary, and then you need to clean it and degrease it. The same thing is true for the block. And on the cylinder block, you'll have to make sure that it's absolutely clean, and this one is not clean. But before I start cleaning it up, I will fill it up with some paper. You can also fill it up with some cloth, clean cloths, because the last thing you want to happen is that there's too much debris and garbage falling into these cylinders. So meanwhile, I've got the cylinders filled up with some clean paper, and now I'm going to start cleaning up the cylinder block. So what I'm going to use to clean the block is just a piece of wood, and it's a hard piece of wood, and I can just scrape off all the debris. Do this with a steel brush and gently go over it. So once you've got most of the debris and leftovers on the cylinder block cleaned up, then it's time to spray it. And I'm using what we call Loctite SF7235. It's the kind of spray you use to clean up brake pads, but it works real great. And just spray it on it, and then we'll wipe it off. I'm going to let it sit a little bit on it. It degreases and it cleans at the same time. So we let it sit for a few seconds, and then I'll rub it off with some clean papers or towels or cloths, whatever you have, because you really want to make sure that the cylinder head is really clean and grease free. And you can see how dirty it is, eh? I'm just going to spray it one more time. We let it sit for a few seconds, and then we clean it up again. And you see I forgot the little corner. So cleanliness is very important, and always make sure that you degrease it very well and that there's no debris left. And let's see how clean it is. Yeah, that looks quite good. You got to make sure that all the channels are open. That's important, and they are. But I see here I have a channel which is a bit clogged up. So if you see any channels that are a bit clogged up, you might want to clean them up. So once it's cleaned up and you've got all the oil and grease removed, it's time to give it another rub, and I'm using a very flat block with some sanding paper or abrasive paper on it, a minimum of a grit 400. So if you have a 600 or an 800, it's even better. It is not the intent that we're going to scrape it all off. It's just slightly going over it, so we get most of the remaining part that may still be there off. I'm not going to really use it too heavily, and try to cover all the surfaces. So that should almost be it. So with the cylinder block cleaned up, I'm going to give it a good vacuum cleaning, especially in the cylinders, so I have no debris or leftovers inside the cylinders. or in between the pistons and the segments. Now some people prefer to blow it out. I like to suck it out with a vacuum cleaner. I think it's better than blowing, because blowing you will blow it inside, and with a vacuum cleaner you will suck it out. So let's clean the cylinder sides, just to make sure there's nothing left in it. Alright, so far so good, and now finally I'm going to clean it one last time with isopropanol, so it is really, really clean. I just want to make sure that these openings are very clean. I can see that there's still a little bit of debris in it. So now we are ready to put the head gasket up, and you might notice that there is a copper side and there is a non-copper side. It is important that you mount the head gasket with the marker this side up to the upward direction. But this typical gasket doesn't have an up sign, so if it doesn't have one, then you know that it always has to be mounted with the copper side facing downwards. Place it on and make sure that all the openings are correct, that nothing is blocked, because that wouldn't be very good. And now we are basically ready to mount the cylinder head. Now that is a heavy piece, so you might need some help if you're not strong enough to lift it up and slide it over these studs. So this is a very heavy block, probably about 20-25 kilograms, if not more. So if you're on your own, you might want to have somebody who can help you. Now I've placed a little washer up here and a nut, so I can actually hold it like this, and in the front, so that is doable. And you've seen how I did it. So now it's time to bolt it all down. There are in total 17 bolts and 5 nuts that hold the cylinder head in place. There are 9 long bolts, like so, and they are fitted on the exhaust side, and then there are 8 short bolts like these, and you can see the difference, fitted in the middle. Now you need to torque those down to the right torque level, and there's a certain sequence on that, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, and I will number the bolts so you can actually see it. Bolting down the cylinder head has to happen in a certain sequence and with a certain torque. So that's why I have numbered the bolts on the cylinder head so you can actually see it. So you need to start with number 1, then go to number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you keep going around in a spiral, like a circle. And you need to do this to avoid distortion of the cylinder head, because if you don't do this, then you're going to have a problem. Now the final torque is about 12.5 kilogram meters, or up to 14.5 kilogram meters. Now that equates in pounds per feet between 90 and 100. So you're going to need what we call a torque wrench. I'm not going to torque him down immediately to the final 12.5 kilogram meters. I will do it in 4 steps. First, finger tight. Then I will apply 1/3 of the final torque, which is 4 kilograms, and I go to 8 kilograms, and then I go to 12. And in between those figures, I keep circling around between all the bolts. So if I've done all bolts at 4, then I go to 8. I do it again, and then I do it at 12. And that way, you can be assured that nothing will go wrong with the cylinder head. So now you can clearly see the sequence of the bolts. I have all the numbers on it. Sometimes it's on the bolt, sometimes it's just on the cylinder head. So I'll start with bolt number 1, and we'll make it hand tight. This is our first round. So we're just gonna go and make it hand tight. And we keep going. So we did all the bolts except the last one, and we made them hand tight. So let me do the last one, and then we can do the first torque settings. So the first torque settings, we'll set it to 4 kg-meters. And we'll start again with bolt number 1, then we go back to bolt 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. So let me do bolt number 1 first. Alright, we do bolt 2. We do bolt number 3. 4, 5, 6, 21, 22. So here we go. Now we've got 8. So we start again with bolt number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 takes a bit of 4, and then we do the final round at 12.5 kilograms. And we go around again in the sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on until you're done with bolt number 22, and then the cylinder head is on torque and you're ready to proceed with the next step. So the next step is to mount the rocker shaft, but before we can do so we need to put the push rods back into place, and the push rods are going in these little holes here. And when we took the engine apart, we made sure that the push rods were in the right sequence, and we kept them that way because you want to place the push rod back in its original position, because all the parts have a wear and tear that's made it to each other. So that is very important to remember. So let me go and get them, and then we put them in one by one. So this is push rod number 1, and I'm going to stick it in with the concave side facing upwards and with the ball shaped part downwards. So there we go. We slide it in, and we'll make sure it fits properly because it's resting on the camshaft, which is sitting below in the engine block. It's different than with a normal new modern engine where the camshaft is on the top. With old engines the camshaft is all the way on the bottom, and these push rods are leaning on that. So let me put them all back. Number 3, number 4, whoops, number 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I just want to make sure they all fit where they're supposed to fit. And now we're going to mount the rocker shaft. So here's the rocker shaft. We just need to slide it on and make sure that all the push rods are fitting. So this is the rocker, this is the rocker shaft, and the rocker has to fit right inside the pocket of the push rod. See? So that needs to go right in there, because otherwise it's not good. So you got to make sure that all of them line up. So that's something you need to pay attention to, that fits. Now I'm not going to tighten them up yet, the rocker shaft, because if you do so you may have a problem, because valves are working with a very small clearance, and therefore I will loosen up all the adjustment nuts first and give it far more slack. So this will prevent the valves touching the pistons just in case. So let me do that. So with all the rockers fitting into the pockets of the push rods, I will now gently tighten up the rocker shaft, but I will not tighten it down before I have given more slack to the adjustment of the valves. That's a very safe way of doing it, because if you don't do that, it is very well possible that the valves will be touching the piston and then you have a problem. And that is because you are working with very, very small clearances. The valve clearance is very minimal. Now we may have flattened the cylinder head. We may have a thicker head gasket. So all these things will affect the overall clearance aspect on the valves. So before I tighten this down, I want to make sure that I don't have that issue, because you will see that some valves will be pushed down. Right now there's a lot of play on it because it's not locked in place yet. As you can tell, there's still a lot. See, this is already rock solid, so this valve has been depressed already to some extent. So let me now first slacken up all the play on the valve adjustments. To create that extra clearance, it's very simple. Just untighten all the counter nuts, like so. Okay, once that's done, just turn them a few turns counterclockwise. That will give you sufficient play, because you will have to adjust the valves anyhow at the end when everything is assembled. And now we can tighten up the rocker shaft. And you can see already that it has gone down. Now it's gonna start depressing some valves. That's quite normal, because at the end that's what it should do. Just want to check a last check that all the push rods are in their pockets. So now we're going to tighten down the rocker shaft and make sure that all the rockers are fit nicely into the pockets of the push rods. And we'll start gently. We go in turns, because we don't want to bend the rocker shaft. Don't force anything, just make it happen slowly. Do a double check. Yep, pockets are good. And keep going. And finally, we'll torque him down to 3 kilogram meters. So now let's try to rotate the engine once and see if everything does what it's supposed to do. Now you can see that the valve clearance is way too much, but that's okay, because we'll do the valve adjustment in another video. So let us try to rotate the engine and see if everything works fine. And I'm rotating the engine at the front pulley, and it seems like all the valves are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Alright guys, we are done. We mounted the cylinder head, we also mounted the rocker shaft, and we made sure that the push-rod pockets fit nicely into the rockers. So now what's left is basically to mount the exhaust and intake manifold, but that you can do on your own. I don't need to explain that. That's just going on the side with a few bolts, and don't forget to put new gaskets up. And then we'll start some more work on the engine in my next video, where we'll readjust the valve clearance, because that valve clearance now is really a bit upset because we loosened up all these counter nuts and all the adjustments, but we had to do that anyhow. So that will be in the next video, where I show you on how to adjust the valves on this Massey Ferguson 35. After that, there are a couple more videos about the cooling system, how we will rebuild that, a new radiator, new water pump. We also will have another video on the injector system, on how to adjust the injectors and how to check it. And then finally we'll put it all back together and we crank it up, and hopefully it works like a champ. Thank you for viewing, and keep watching my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and if you have any comments, please feel free to comment. I am always willing to learn from you. Thank you. Bye-bye.